Depression with your host, Diva with Depression.
Welcome to Breaking the Mask of Depression with me, your host, the Diva with Depression. How are you guys doing today? How are you really doing? I always have to ask that question. That's the question that we really should be asking everybody. Not just how are you doing, but how are you really doing? Because you want to know how they're really doing. And if I want to be honest, I'm not doing all that well. So that's why I always ask, how are you guys really doing? Because, you know, when you're like me and others, when you find it hard to get up every single day and find a will to live and find hope, when you have all of this bullshit going on around you, it's kind of hard to find a reason to hang on. You know, every single day is something different. Not even every single day, every fucking hour it's something different. And so it's kind of hard to find hope. It's hard to find the will, you know, and you guys know that I'm not one to sort of sugarcoat and, you know, give you guys the little cliche and rainbows bullshit. I know how hard it is to live in the darkness and find slivers of light. So I don't know if it's advice to you, but all I can say is don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about next week. Just try to find a reason to hang on today. Try to find a reason to hang on to the next moment. You know, the other day I was feeling down and I found out that my oldest baby became a nurse. I'm so excited to share that with the world, you know, and I was so excited and I said, okay, you know, that was a reason for me to hang on to today. And then the next day I just said, well, let me find a reason for today. And that's what we have to do. You know, we just have to find a reason every hour, you know, every minute to find a reason to hang on, because it's a struggle. And guys, you know that I know that. And I know a lot of people don't understand how our minds operate and how we feel. And it hurts, you know, that the people that love us the most don't really understand how we feel and how our brains operate, but we know how we feel. And I don't know, sometimes I guess that's a good thing, that at least we know that there are others out there that understand how we feel. So you're not by yourself. I'm here and I know what you're going through. So hang on to me, and we're going to find a moment, an hour, or a day. We're going to find a reason to hang on to each other and to push through. Okay? Okay. So, I hope that you guys got a chance to listen to the grief episode, What is Grief Part 1? And if you didn't, go back and listen to it. It's on all the listening platforms. And in that episode, I sort of talked about, well, number one, that I'm trying to have a little series, you know, because I was explaining that myself and a lot of people around me in my circle and in my world have been struggling with a lot of grief in the past year, a lot of losses, physical losses, and everybody is trying to, you know, cope with it. And we all deal with grief differently, but we don't talk about it enough, you know, especially in the Black community. You know, we say a prayer and they're, you know, out of pain and, you know, they're with God, or, you know, all the little sayings, but that's not enough, you know. And so I decided that I was going to do this little series, and nothing in any kind of order, but just, you know, connecting the dots on the different types of grief. And so in the first episode, I discussed what grief was and the different types of grief, and how some of the symptoms of grief, and what they say are the stages that we're supposed to go through, and some of the ways that we can deal with the loss of people, people, loved ones, pets, physical losses, I call them. Don't quote me on that. I don't want to get in trouble, but the physical losses, that's not the only thing that we lose. Those are not the only things that we grieve. We grieve lots of losses. We grieve anything that we lose that is important to us. And so that's what hit me when I was writing the first episode. I said, okay, well, I'm going to have to break this down, because that's not, we have to talk about all the losses that we can experience that we will be grieving. So for this episode, I wanted to talk about those losses. I want to talk about the losses of, I was trying to think of the word, but experiences. The loss of things that you can't touch but you feel. How does that sound? The loss of things that you can't touch but you feel. And so some examples of that would be the first episode, and I think I touched on this a couple of times throughout many different episodes that I have had throughout the podcast journey, because I talk about the loss of my sister several times. But when I lost my sister, I also went through the empty nest stage with my kids, because they both were leaving home at the same time. And so much of my identity was mom. I was the mom, the PTA, the, carpooler, the Girl Scout mom, the Girl Scout leader mom, the soccer mom, you name it, I was the mom. And so my whole identity was mom. And so now, what the hell was I going to do? I had been mommy all this time. And so now, who was I? And so I was grieving the loss of being mom, that mom, So now I had to find the new mom, the new level mom. I think in like the video games, you're at level 12 or something. So I was at a different level of mom. And that was a loss. That was a major loss, because number one, they weren't going to be in the house with me anymore. And that was scary, because, in addition to not being in the house, with me, my kids not being with me, it also was a trauma trigger that I was going to be living alone. And also, who am I going to cook dinner for? Who am I going to drive to? Who am I going to go to the store with? Who am I going to? All these things, it's just a whole big mess. I had to, that was something that I was going to have to grieve. I was going to have to grieve the emptiness, the empty nest experience, and find a way to become me. And let's be honest, I'm going to be honest, I haven't done it yet. I still haven't done it. So, there's that. Then you could be going through a divorce or a separation, which I did that also, but that's a whole nother show, Oprah show. The death of a spouse or an ex, a breakup. If when we left the first time that I got separated and moved to another state, there was a big adjustment, because I had to be the head of the household, You know, like I had to take out the garbage. That was my first big thing, right? Like, who the hell's gonna take out the garbage? You know, like what? And I moved from the south. I moved from the south back north, and there was when the first big snow came, I'm like, well, who's gonna shovel all this snow? You know? And it was like, I have to shovel the snow, you know? But you have to start to, you know, like, get used to the fact that life is different. You know, you have to start to grieve the loss of a commitment. You have to grieve the loss of a couple. You have to grieve the loss of shared experiences. You have to find a way to not feel like a failure. That is a big thing, not feeling like a failure. I don't think I've gotten there yet, and it's been many, many years. You always feel like there's something that you could have done to save a relationship. But, you know, those are different things that you have to grieve when it comes to a divorce, a separation, a breakup. What's something else? A chronic illness. You know, you have to, that comes with grief. You know, if you have an illness that is going to change your way of living physically, you know, you may have to walk with assistance, or maybe you have an illness that you have to take medication every single day, you know, certain times a day, or you need a breathing apparatus that you have to carry with you. That's something that is going to change your way of living. Fertility, you know, maybe you have to do IVF, you know, so your dream of getting pregnant naturally is put on the back burner, and you have to do it go through the in vitro process. You know, you have to grieve the natural way of getting pregnant. You have to grieve that, you know, but we don't think about those things. You know, like, we don't really think about that. That is a point there, you know. We don't think about it as grief, you know, but it is grief, because that is a major loss. Having a disabled child, because if you think about it, when you have a disabled child, there are things that you're just not going to be able to do, because you're always going to be a caretaker. You're always going to be a caretaker. You're not going to be able to, you know, go to all the places that you may go to with your other children. You know, your child that is living with a disability may not be able to participate in everything. And so you have to grieve the fact that your child might not play football, soccer, baseball, you know, volleyball, you know, do different things like that. You know, you may have to grieve the fact that you won't get to take that child to Disney World. And you know, to some people it may sound minor, but it is a big thing, because you had dreams of having a child and going through all of the motions, you know, and having all these milestones, and those are all put to bed, so to speak, because your child, you don't have the ability to do those things with your child. So that's grieving. Loss of a pet. Now listen, I have a grand doggy, and we have had Louis since he was a little peanut, and guess he was the size of a little peanut, just about. And so if ever there was a time when we don't have Louis, Oh my goodness, I don't know what we're going to do. Pets are a part of the family. You hear me? I mean, what do we do? You know, when I was younger and I would go to my grandparents' house every summer, every school holiday, if I could, I'd be in Virginia, and we had a dog named Bob. I know the dog named Bob. Who comes up with these things? But Bob was my ace, okay? And Bob and I did everything together. And if Bob wasn't feeling good, I was right there next to Bob, making sure that, look, we got to get Bob feeling better. And Bob followed me everywhere. Bob made sure that I was okay. Bob went ahead of me when I went out to pick the tomatoes and stuff to make sure that there were no snakes or anything. I mean, pets are our friends, okay? They are our family members, and there is nothing in this world that the majority of us would not do without for our pets. So that is definitely grief. The loss of a first love. Ooh, boy. Yeah, that's a whole nother Oprah show too. But that's a loss. Celebrities. Listen, when Prince took his last breath, my phone was ringing off the hook, okay? Because everybody that knows me knows that I bleed purple. That man, we have to have a moment of silence right now. Because that man, the same thing with Gerald Levert, Isaac Hayes. Listen, look, I'm getting choked up now just talking about it. Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin. These people were just a deep, deep part of our childhood. You hear what I'm saying? In my video, there's a video that I have on my Insta and on my TikTok talking about, the death of our childhood, like childhood losses. Heavy D and Biz Markie, Howie T, and it's just Black Rob, Craig Mack. These are people that are supposed to live forever, No, even though nobody lives forever, but this is our childhood. Frankie Beverly is just supposed to live forever, you know what I'm saying? Good Lord. Oh, God. Okay. But anyway, you get what I'm saying? The loss of a job. Now, the loss of a job means loss of income. It means the loss of stability, the loss of independence. But when you retire, that's a loss of stability, a loss of routine. You don't have anything to do every single day. That's why you see when somebody retires, usually they go out and they get something else, like a part-time job or something like that, because they just don't like sitting at home, So we have to look at it. The correct term for it is secondary grief, which I don't know. I guess that's the technical term for it, but I like mine better. It's a loss that you can't touch, but you can feel. It sounds better than secondary. I don't like that. But there's a diagram I'll post this on the Instagram page because I like the way they set this up. But the loss of a support system, the loss of financial security, the loss of faith, and that's a good one. The loss of faith, the loss of income, loss of identity, the loss of dreams for the future, which is what I was explaining with a disabled child, the fertility, loss of confidence. And we don't think about that with the, if you lost a job, it does affect your confidence. It affects how you feel about yourself, because if you can't earn and take care of yourself, you can't take care of your family, then that sort of affects how you feel about yourself. So I think I get that part. Loss of faith. The disabled child part, the fertility part, you sort of feel like the higher power didn't do enough to ensure that you had a healthy baby. I can get that part. I can get that. Loss of identity, which is what I was explaining to you with the empty nest syndrome. What do you do after, being a mom for 21 years? The same thing with the divorce and the separation and the breakup, friendship. What do you do now when you're all alone? How do you take the next step to be just you? Who are you? People don't think about the fact that when you have best friends, say it's just you and your best friend, and you're inseparable from childhood on up, and then you separate. Who are you without that best friend? And how do you make new friends? It's so hard to make new friends. And so these are things that we shouldn't ignore. We shouldn't trivialize them, because they're important. They're very, very important, especially when it comes to our identity, because identity is important because it contributes to our mental health. You know what I mean? Because that your self-esteem, your confidence, all of that goes into your happiness and how you feel. Because how you feel about yourself is important. And if you don't feel that you are worthy, if you don't feel like you matter, then you're not going to do what it takes to get better, if that makes sense. And so we have to stop overlooking things and saying, oh, that's not important. It is important. When you see people, let's just take someone that retires at 67. They retire and they're home and they're just sitting there watching The Price is Right. And every day they get up and they have their coffee and their bagel, and then they just sit there and they watch The Price is Right, and they watch the this and they watch the that, and then every day, but you don't see that they're not happy. They're just going through a spiral, a routine. They need to get out, or find something to do, even if it's, something to do on the computer or some type of hobby. Get out, walk. Those are the people that you have to watch out for. If you see your loved ones going in that direction, and hey, let's go for a walk, or, you want to go to the store, or you want to do this, you want to do that, because those are the people that'll get in a rut and it'll be hard to get out of. That's just not something that you overlook and be like, oh, haha, he just likes watching The Price is Right. Well, he may like The Price is Right, but he may also like to go outside for a little while, go to the store. Just because we're introverts doesn't mean that we don't like to go out every once in a while or don't like to be asked to go out every once in a while. So, you have to know the signs. You have to know what to pay attention to, because grief can very easily slip into the danger zone. Grief can very easily turn into a major depressive episode. The sadness from a loss can turn into the brain fog and the decreased energy and the changes in appetite and the feelings of guilt. And, with grief, for example, you'll see, the person will still enjoy activities from time to time, and then all of a sudden they'll lose interest in it. That's from grief. Then that's just going from grief to depression. And so then that's what you have to watch for. Sadness linked to the loss turns into sadness and hopelessness and worthless thinking. That's depression, from grief to depression. And so that's what we have to watch for. And so stop being afraid to talk about stuff. These are not curse words. Black people really think that everything is a curse word. Everything has to be a secret, and it's not. We have to start learning the right terms for things, and we have to start having these conversations. Grief can come and go. It can come at any time. And there's no set time. The other day, I just started bawling. And it was because of something that happened on TV. But whatever happened on TV triggered a memory of something, and I just started crying. It doesn't matter. It can come and go. And it could affect you in any kind of way. And there's no right way to grieve. Everybody grieves differently. I was telling someone the other day, like, men and women, but a lot of men have grief sex. Like that's their way of grieving. And it was the wildest thing when I finally read about it. It was the wildest thing, but that's their way of grieving. And it's a thing. But you wouldn't think about that. You wouldn't think that that is what's happening in the moment. But it's a thing. But because we keep these things to ourselves, we don't know that that's a thing. So let's talk about it. You could be a devout Christian and change churches, or your pastor leaves and a new pastor comes in, or you change, maybe you change religions. You're grieving the loss of the old pastor to the new pastor. You're grieving the old church to the new church. You're grieving the old religion to the new religion. This is grief. Any loss that affects you deeply is grief. And it doesn't matter if it's a person, place, or thing. It's a loss. And it's anything. Or a milestone, a new house may trigger grief because that person is not there to share the new house with you. It's just different things, guys. It's different things. And there's just no set way to deal with it. And you just have to be aware of the different types of grief, and that they're out there, and that your feelings, whatever they are valid, and however you choose to grieve is perfectly normal and perfectly fine. And it's okay. It's absolutely okay. So, it's okay. I just have to keep saying that because I want you to know that there's nothing abnormal about how you feel and how you go about it. You know, a birthday is going to come up for someone that you lost, and maybe the first birthday after they're gone is going to be really hard for you. And the birthday after that, you'll be able to cry and smile. And then maybe it'll get a little bit easier after that. Or maybe it won't. Either way, that's your way of handling it. But you'll find a way to overcome the hurdles. I cannot lie and say that everything is going to get easier. If you're mourning the loss of a job, and you haven't found a new job, then maybe find a way to volunteer. Find a way to leave the house. Maybe go to the library and job search while you're in the library. Or, volunteer at somewhere in the neighborhood. But don't stay in the house. Try to get out. If you're, struggling with your disabled child, look around the community and see if there are some organizations that will be able to help you find resources for you and your child. Because I can guarantee you that whatever situation you are in, you're not the only one. And that's what we have to remember. You're never the only one. Never, ever. I can guarantee you. Even when they say 1 in a million, there's 2 in a million. And that number 2 might be living right next door. You're never alone. Never. So there's a community somewhere around you. And if they're not next door to you, there's a virtual community waiting to embrace you. So just don't sit alone with your grief. There's somebody there waiting to help you. So guys, please don't be quiet about what you're going through. There are support groups online. I know that I mentioned GriefShare. That is one of the bigger organizations out there. And I know that they have online support groups, and they have local ones also. You can go to their website, GriefShare, and see if they have in-person support groups in your area. And I know that grief is a very, 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 very common subject that many of us don't talk about enough. So please share this with your circle and your community so you can help someone work through their loss. Please, so they can work through it safely and healthy. Okay? Share. I thank you guys for listening and supporting. If you feel the wind blow you, please leave a review on one of the listening pages. I would love to hear from you. If you have any suggestions on a subject that you would like for me to explore, please do. Please protect yourself, protect your family, and protect your peace. I will talk to you guys soon. Okay? Be well. Bye.
Sometimes